Good evening. Let us begin very close to where we actually live, not where we wish we lived. When you close your eyes and say, "I am praying," what really happens in you? Listen to the words that rise, the wants that press forward, the little fears that stand behind the words and push them out. You may ask for safety for a child, for a position to open, for a pain to ease, for the rent to be met. You may dress it in reverent phrases, but if you sit still for 30 seconds and watch, you will notice there is usually an object on the table of thought and a subtle hope that God may be moved to arrange it. Now then, this is not confession time, and it is not blame time. We must never use the words right and wrong about these things. There are states and stages of consciousness, and we are locating ourselves only so we may take the next step honestly. Let me bring in a question, slowly, because it undoes a great deal of what we have been taught to do when we fold our hands. What would you tell God that God does not already know? Sit with it. What information, what emergency bulletin, what itemized list could be news in omniscience? If there is an infinite intelligence, if there is a presence that is life itself, then who is being informed when we pour out descriptions and deadlines and details? You see, if we are candid, most petitionary prayer is not conversation with God at all. It is self-talk in the direction of God, an effort to persuade the universe to shift the scenery while leaving our consciousness where it was. And watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the work we are doing here. Any form of prayer that aims to change God's action before it aims to awaken our perception will eventually disappoint us. Not because God withholds, but because the very premise is turned the wrong way. Now, I have no spiritual pride in saying this. I know where I am, and I know where I am not yet. I have prayed both ways, oh yes. And I understand why petition feels natural. It rises spontaneously when fear is close. So we will not shame that impulse. We will outgrow it. In other words, we will allow prayer itself to become a ladder of consciousness. There is a before and there is an after. Before, we speak many words to steady the mind. After, words fall away because something within has awakened. We will have, together, a simple map that brings relief rather than strain. Petition as a beginning, affirmation as a stabilizing of thought, silence as the doorway, and contact as the fulfillment. By the time we are through, you will see why informing God is never the essence of prayer, and why the only fruitful object of prayer is the transformation of our own consciousness until we can receive what already is. For this evening, let the question do its gentle work in you. What would you tell God that God does not already know? And feel the uneasiness give way to a quiet assurance that perhaps prayer is not a performance to secure attention, but a practice to awaken attention. Now then, let us place one stone that will carry the weight of all that follows. And if you can let it settle in you, quietly, it will take the Santa Claus out of God and the strain out of prayer. God is spirit. Let those 3 words do their work. God is not a person over there with moods and calendars, not a chieftain on a throne who can be flattered or hurried or argued into an intervention. God is spirit, omnipresent presence, infinite intelligence, the living law that is also love. In other words, the nature of God determines the nature of prayer. If God is spirit, we must go to God for the things of spirit: light, wisdom, guidance, peace, grace, and the inner assurance that reveals itself as right activity. We do not go to spirit for objects. Never, never, Never. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. I am not speaking from the standpoint of any custom or habit that may have taught you to treat God as a celestial distributor of favors. We will not criticize those who have prayed that way. We will simply outgrow it. There are states and stages of consciousness, and as we come to this awareness, God is spirit, we discover why petition disappoints us. To ask spirit for a thing is to misread the nature of spirit, just as it would be to ask the law of mathematics to deliver a shiny coin. Mathematics gives order. When you consent to its order, your problems of number are resolved. God, as spirit, gives light. When you consent to that light, the forms that belong to that light appear in their season, lawfully, without bargaining. You see, when God is accepted as omnipresent spirit, distance is eliminated. There is no near and far in spirit. There is no God is busy elsewhere. No, if I can only reach him. The issue is never proximity from God's side. The issue is awareness, our contact. Electricity is in the wire, but until you make contact, the room is dark. God is the life in which you live and move and have your being. But until inner contact is made, omnipresence is not availability. Prayer, then, is not the art of getting God to act. It is the discipline of becoming receptive to what already is. Now I know why the mind wants a person on a throne. It wants someone to persuade, someone to outline to, someone to hold responsible when the outline fails. But spirit is not subject to personal will. Spirit is principle. Spirit is also love, and so it is not cold, it is warm with grace. Yet, because it is law as well as love, it does not bend to our pictures. When we stop trying to move God and begin to be still enough to be moved by God, everything changes. Peace begins to rise of its own accord. Ideas show up like dawn through a window, and the right human footsteps, which we could not invent in fear, become obvious. So let us mark it down in our hearts. If I am praying to get God to do something, I have not yet remembered that God is spirit. If I am turning within for light, for the quickening of awareness, for that inner click of presence, I am honoring God as God is. And from that honoring, forms are added, never as bribes, always as byproducts, because contact with spirit fulfills itself as harmony on whatever level I am standing today. Now then, let us put this on the table very plainly, so there need be no shame and no argument in us. We must never use the words right and wrong about prayer. There are states and stages of consciousness. You see, the form prayer takes will always mirror the state of the one who prays, and that is not a sin. That is a diagnosis. As in school, the child at the blackboard adds and subtracts. Later, that same child handles algebra. Later still, the symbols of higher mathematics appear, and, to the child of yesterday, they would look like nonsense. In other words, we outgrow, we do not denounce. I have no spiritual pride in this. I know where I am, and I know just where I am not yet. So let us speak as grown students, kindly and honestly, about a simple ladder. Petition to affirmation, to silence, to contact. Petition is the first rung. It is the most natural cry of human sense when fear is close and forms look scarce. Father, fix this, give me that. And sometimes it steadies the heart because at least it turns us somewhere other than the problem. Do not sneer at that. Never be ashamed to acknowledge that at times you have prayed that way. Most of us have, and sometimes still do. But watch out. If we remain there, if we make a practice of petition, we tacitly assume that God is somewhere withholding and must be persuaded, informed, or moved. And with that assumption, we install in consciousness a God who has to be convinced. That is the quiet dishonor. It keeps our attention on objects and deadlines and robs us of the one thing we truly need: light. Affirmation is the next rung. Having wearied of pleading, we begin to declare truth. God is spirit. God is here. Harmony is the nature of being. I live and move and have my being in God. This is a holy step because it lifts the mind from fear's pictures and sets it in the atmosphere of principle. It is like placing a straight edge on a crooked page. But even here, let us be honest. Affirmation is still mental activity. It may steady thought, it may refine desire, but it is not yet arrival. We must be grateful for it, and then, in due season, outgrow it too. Silence is the third rung. Not a blankness, not a forced emptiness, but a consenting hush in which we cease telling God about God and let Spirit be itself in us. Here, words subside because the need has shifted from speaking to receiving. And if you are faithful to that hush, sometimes a minute, sometimes 10, the last rung appears of itself. Contact. No speech, no argument, no bargaining, a wordless communion, an inner click. In that instant, omnipresence becomes availability. Peace rises unmanufactured, and within a very short time, the next right activity shows itself, and the needed forms are added lawfully. So, you see, prayer evolves as consciousness evolves. The goal is never better begging. The goal is higher awareness. We are not throwing stones at the alphabet because we are reading. We are acknowledging that we have letters to thank for the sentence, and still, the sentence belongs to a larger book. As we go on together, we are not condemning earlier prayer. We are outgrowing it as we would outgrow a child's arithmetic into higher mathematics, honoring each rung while placing our foot on the next. Now then, why does petition feel so natural to us? Because human sense wakes up most mornings in a world of pictures that look urgent. Lack here, a pain there, a worry about the future, a loneliness in the night, a headline that threatens our little ship. Instinctively, the lips shape themselves around, "Father, protect me. Open a door. Heal this. Send that answer by Friday." And I am not criticizing that reflex. I know it. I have seen fear close in and words go out almost in the same breath. You see, at the level of human thought, asking seems sane because we are used to moving objects with words and effort and plans. So we try to move God in the same way. But pause a moment and let a sober question do its work. What is the use of asking God for anything? Not as cynicism, no, not that, but as metaphysical logic. If there is one infinite intelligence, one presence that is the life of all, what could you tell it that it does not already know? What could you add to omniscience? And tell me, to whom are you directing this shopping list if God is spirit, omnipresent, closer than breathing? Are we not, without seeing it, pretending that God is one step away, withholding, waiting to be pushed or persuaded? There is a hidden premise buried in petition, and we must turn on the light gently and look at it. The premise is that God has something we do not have, and may or may not release, and so we must present a case. The moment that premise is accepted, God in our thought becomes a dispenser, a celestial counter with a clerk behind it, and our words become tickets we hope will be stamped. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of this work. The instant you ask Spirit for money as an object, or for a job as an object, or for a person to change so you can be more comfortable, you have turned the infinite into a cosmic errand runner. Never, never, never. God is spirit, principle and love, not a supermarket for minds in a hurry. Now, it is not that God will not help. Do not hear that. It is that the method of petition for things keeps consciousness glued to the things. While we describe the tumor to God, we contemplate the tumor. While we specify the debt, we contemplate the debt. While we outline how someone should behave, our inner eye is fixed right on their misbehavior. And in that very act, we feed the picture that frightens us. We enlarge it by our attention, and we postpone the only event that ends fear. Light. You see, attention is the gate of consciousness. Turn it to the object, you get more object. Turn it to spirit, you invite illumination, and illumination carries in it the pattern for right activity. So the delicate dishonor in petition is not rudeness. It is misdirection. It assigns to God a role God does not fill, and assigns to us a task we cannot complete. Managing effects without touching cause. The remedy is simple and exacting. Shift the gaze. Go to God for God. Go to Spirit for light, for the hush that dissolves fear's picture, for the wisdom that, once felt, makes the next human step so obvious you could not miss it. Then, without bargaining, without outlining, you find that forms are added, lawfully in their time, because attention on God bears its own fruit. Now, let us bring the scripture into the room, not as a club, but as a lamp. Because if you read with your inner ear, you will hear precisely what we have been saying for these evenings. In Luke we are told, "Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, neither for the body, what ye shall put on. Your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But rather seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." You see the order? Not plan and plead for the outer, but seek the within, and the outer takes care of itself by law. Added is the word. Added, not manufactured by anxiety. Added, not bargained into being. Added, not bribe for prayer well performed. Now then, someone will say, but doesn't the Master also say, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." And again, "What things soever ye desire, believe that ye receive them." And the answer is, yes, but watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. These are not invitations to outline forms. They are calls to realization. Ask for what? For the kingdom. Seek what? The reign of spirit within consciousness. Knock where? At the door of your own awareness. Enter into thy closet until the presence reveals itself. And when the contact is made, the things that belong to that light appear of themselves, in their time, as the byproduct of realization. That is prayer as the Master taught it. The kingdom of God is within you. Not in a future place or a far heaven, but within. Meaning the government of spirit realized in your consciousness as peace, as assurance, as a felt presence. And here is the key distinction that unlocks the riddle. Omnipresence is not the same as availability. Spirit is everywhere, closer than breath. But harmony appears on the level of our experience only as contact is realized. Electricity is in the wire, The lamp illumines when contact is made. God is the life in which you live and move and have your being. Provision, guidance, right activity appear when your inner ear has heard, when the click within says, I am here. So never again read ask as dictate. Read it as consent. Never again read desire as outline this form for me, but as let thy will, thy nature, thy light register here. And then trust the promise without strain. All these things shall be added. Added lawfully, because cause has touched effect. Added quietly, because the kingdom does not arrive with observation or fanfare. Added unfailingly, because when God is sought as God, God fulfills himself as harmony. Seek first the inner kingdom, and let the outer be the echo of that seeking. Now then, what do we do with words while we are still trembling a little, still looking at problems that seem to shout for attention? We use them as a nurse uses a hand on the forehead, quietly, not as a technique to rearrange the world, but to steady the patient. Affirmations and denials, rightly used, are like a railing on a staircase. They keep us from falling back into panic while we climb. God is spirit. God is here. I live and move and have my being in God. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. You see, such statements do not give God information, nor do they recruit God to our side. They remind consciousness of its atmosphere. They lift thought out of the clamor of sense into the climate of truth long enough for the heartbeat to settle and the inner ear to begin to hear. But watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. The moment we treat an affirmation as a lever to pry a result out of spirit, we have slipped back to outlining, only now with polished phrases. Never, never, never use truth as a tool to make God perform. That is merely petition dressed in metaphysical clothing. If we repeat, I have supply, 10,000 times with an eye on the calendar and the mailbox, our real prayer is to the calendar and the mailbox. We are not honoring God as spirit. We are bargaining with time and trying to hypnotize ourselves into comfort. Here is the subtle trap. The lips say, I am whole, but a little lookout in the mind peers at the symptom and whispers, are you sure? The lips say, all needs are met, but the inner eye glances at the checkbook and tightens. That split attention keeps prayer verbal and effortful. It keeps the mind ricocheting between truth and picture, between God and effect, and in that ricochet, no contact is made. We have polished the words, we have not changed the gaze. We remain busy, and in spiritual work, busyness is not holiness. Repetition without release only tires the tongue and fattens the fear it secretly watches. So, let us make the gentle upgrade. Use truth statements only for one purpose: to still the surface, to calm the flutter, to bring the mind to the threshold of receptivity. 2 or 3 times, enough to bring you out of the picture, and then be still. Let the words fall like a small stone into a deep well, and listen for the ripple to fade. Father, reveal thyself. Then no more speech, no more shaping outcomes with sentences. Consent to silence. For the destination is not better words. It is that hush in which worship becomes in spirit and in truth, and in which the contact announces itself without a syllable. We must never use the words right and wrong about this. There are states and stages of consciousness. If today requires 20 affirmations to keep you from panic, make them with humility and be grateful that they can hold you steady. If tomorrow only 1 is needed and then the quiet opens, rejoice. You are not failing when words appear. You are maturing when they are no longer necessary. Measure not by how many times you can declare a statement, but by how swiftly the inner atmosphere turns from effort to peace. And remember, the proof that the purpose has been served is not a louder affirmation. It is the soft arrival of assurance, followed by light, followed by the next right activity that shows itself without strain, and the forms that belong to that light added, lawfully, in their time. Now then, let us place our feet squarely on the ground that the earlier steps were leading us to. Because if you miss this, you will keep polishing words and never touch the flame. The highest prayer is not asking. It is not pleading. It is not bargaining. Prayer, in its essence, is a state of inner communion, wordless receptivity. In other words, prayer is not speech toward God. It is listening until contact is felt. We go to God, not for the picture that frightens us, not for the form our mind would prefer, but for the presence itself. When that presence is touched, light appears, and from light, right activity unfolds, and the needed forms are added lawfully in their time. What does this feel like? You see, we must be concrete, or the mind will think this is philosophy. In the true hush, the mind relaxes its grip on sentences and begins to sense a quiet that is not self-produced. It is as if the air in the room becomes alive, as if a soft warmth stirs without temperature, as if space itself develops a tone. No syllable passes, and yet you know. A weightless assurance settles in. Not excitement, not a storm of emotion, but a steady, living stillness. Sometimes it is a light pressure at the heart. Sometimes a breath that seems to breathe you. Sometimes only a certainty that requires no argument. There is an inner click. Oh, you will come to recognize it. And in that click, omnipresence becomes availability. Now, how do we enter this? With the simplest approach human language can offer, before language is dismissed. Father, reveal thyself. Father, reveal thyself. Not for a thing, not for a change in a person. Reveal thyself, thy nature, thy presence, thy law, thy love. Let that phrase be spoken softly, once or twice, like a key turning in a lock, and then be still. Words beyond that often block the very door we are seeking to open, because words keep the personal mind active, keep the sense of a person trying to reach a person, keep negotiations alive. Spirit is not reached by argument. Spirit is recognized as presence when the mind yields its noise. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. This silence is not passive daydreaming. It is holy attentiveness. It is not a nap. It is not a drift. It is an alert listening, a poised expectancy that knocks at the door of your own consciousness. Here am I. That is the posture. No outlining. Never, never, never attempt to negotiate conditions with God. Sit as one who honors God as spirit and therefore refuses to treat God as a means to an end. Your only request, if it may be called a request at all, is consent. Reveal thyself. When the mind wanders, do not scold it. Gently return with the same small key, Father, reveal thyself, and again release the words. Do not time your silence with anxiety. Do not demand a sensation. Sometimes the contact is bright and unmistakable. Sometimes it is a feather touch. It is enough. The function of prayer is fulfilled not when a sentence is perfected, but when the hush ripens into that inward knowing. From there, peace will precede you into the day. Ideas will come as if placed in your hand, and the next right step will show itself without strain. This is prayer. This is worship in spirit and in truth. Wordless receptivity until contact is felt, and then quiet obedience to the light that follows. Now then, let us speak of the simplest key the heart can turn before the door swings inward. Gratitude without an object. You see, there is a gratitude that is merely commerce. Thank you for the check, for the healing, for the favorable turn. And while courtesy is not a sin, and we will never call it wrong, that kind of gratitude remains on the level of the transaction. It waits for evidence and then says, "Good, the package arrived." Spiritual gratitude is another thing entirely. It is gratitude for God's being, for the fact of presence, for the nature of spirit as perfection and grace, before a single outer ripple has changed. In other words, it is love to God, not as supplier. It is appreciation of what is, not relief that my picture improved. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. The moment you try to use gratitude to get a thing, it ceases to be gratitude and becomes a technique. And techniques belong to the mental level. Never, never, never attempt to thank your way into a specific outcome. That is outlining in a softer voice. It keeps the personal mind in charge, and the personal mind is precisely what must yield if contact is to be felt. Gratitude, in the spiritual sense, is the atmosphere in which the personal sense dissolves. It is not a lever, it is a letting. Why does this work lawfully and not as flattery? Because gratitude is consent. It releases the clenched fist of self-will. It quiets the vigilance that keeps peeking at symptoms and calendars. It dissolves resistance and fear by taking attention off the problem picture and setting it, gently, steadily, on the nature of God. The heart that rests in "Thou art" stops arguing with appearances. And when argument ends, the mind's noise falls. And when noise falls, receptivity appears. You cannot hear a whisper while dictating a letter. You cannot feel the warmth of the fire while pacing the room in debate. Gratitude sits down, turns toward the flame, and says inwardly, "I know thy nature. I honor thy presence. I love thy law." Do not confuse this with emotion. Love for God, as we speak it here, is a practice, not a mood. Some days it will be felt as warmth. Some days it will be as dry as a desert wind, and yet you take your place. You rest your thought, again and again, in appreciation of being, God being God. Father, I thank thee that thou art. Not for this or that. Drop the object. The objects will be added. We know that law. But now, we are cultivating a climate within in which words grow quiet of themselves. Gratitude, sustained without bargaining, ripens affirmation into silence. It takes the truth you have been declaring and warms it until the syllables melt, and what remains is a hush that listens. There are states and stages of consciousness, and we must never use the words right and wrong here. If today you find your lips saying, "Thank you for this improvement," do not scold yourself. Just notice the hook, and as swiftly as you can, unhook it. Thank you that thou art here as life, as intelligence, as love. Then stop. Be still in that climate. Let gratitude do her quiet work of yielding you, not moving God. And you will discover, sometimes almost imperceptibly at first, that a soft assurance begins to rise, and in that assurance, the contact comes nearer, and with contact, light, and with light, right activity, and the forms that belong to that light added, lawfully, in their time. Objectless gratitude is the doorway from mental prayer into spiritual contact. Enter there, and the soul opens. Now then, let us say it as plainly as language can say it, so there is no mystery where there need be none. Before contact, life feels like struggle, because the sense of separation colors everything we see. Sin appears real and inevitable. Disease presents itself as power. Lack and limitation parade as facts with authority. The heart feels orphaned, and the mind behaves like a beggar, reaching, arranging, fearing, outlining. But hear me. That entire picture is not a report on God. It is a report on awareness. It is not a lack of God. It is a lack of contact. You see, omnipresence can be in the room and the lamp, yet be dark until the switch is touched. God is omnipresent to the starving man, yet without contact, omnipresence is of no avail. That is not a cruelty of God, it is a description of law. Availability is realized at the point of contact, no sooner, no otherwise. After contact, nothing in God has changed. The change is in the sense of being. A quiet assurance settles in, not with fireworks, not with a bell in the ear, but as a living stillness, an inner yes. There is a click. Oh, you will come to recognize it. And in that instant, the mind stops reaching outward and rests in presence. The breath becomes unlabored. The heartbeat of fear quiets, and a subtle rightness fills the atmosphere. You may open your eyes to the same room, the same ledger, the same appointment book, yet the authority has shifted. The picture is no longer master. Spirit felt as presence is now the government within. And under that government, harmony begins its unobtrusive work. What changes next? Not magic tricks, not prizes for piety, but unfoldment. Light gives birth to right activity. That idea you could not manufacture in agitation arrives as if it had been waiting at the door. The next step, this call, that letter, this move, that silence, becomes obvious, and fear gives way to obedience. Right timing, right relationships, right conditions appear as the forms that belong to light. Not because God was coaxed, but because alignment expresses itself by law. Supply shows up, not as a windfall dropped to prove a point, but as the natural outflow of order re-entered. Peace is first, then guidance, then demonstration, always in that sequence. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Never, never, never mistake the click for a license to start outlining. Do not rush from communion to blueprint. Stay in the hush long enough for light to shape the step, and then take only the step that light provides. In other words, honor the mode of spirit, revelation first, manifestation next, not the mode of fear, demand first, scramble next. So hold this in your heart. The difference between struggle and harmony is not God's location, it is contact. Omnipresence is the fact. Availability is the experience. Contact is the hinge between the two. Therefore, our whole discipline is not to inform God or importune God, but to make and remake contact, quietly, faithfully, until the inner click is felt. From there, you will find the day governed, not by your planning, but by presence. And the evidence of that governance will be the ease with which the next right thing is done, and the forms that belong to that ease added, lawfully, in their time. Now then, let us put our finger on the chief saboteur of this holy hush. Outlining. What do I mean? Outlining is when we specify the shape of the answer and then call it prayer. This job, that sum. This person changed in precisely this way. By Friday. It is when the mind draws blueprints and then seeks heaven's stamp of approval. You see, the very moment we do this, we have quietly left the level of spirit and dropped to the level of personal will. We have moved from contact to control, from listening to dictating, and we wonder why the line goes dead. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. The metaphysical error in outlining is simple and radical. It assumes that the personal sense knows the form of good better than the spirit that is good. It replaces omniscient principle with a very small architect, the anxious mind. It is the clay telling the potter what vessel to make. And the instant we do that, attention slides back to effects and away from cause. We begin serving two masters, trying to hold the hush while clenching a picture, and the inner tug-of-war frays the contact. Never, never, never try to influence God or dictate the mode of unfoldment. God is spirit, law as well as love, and love expresses itself by its own perfect law when we stop interfering with it. Let me say it in a different way, so the heart cannot miss it. Outlining is like standing at the seashore with a thimble, demanding the ocean arrive in your thimble by 3 o'clock. Even if a drop arrives, you have traded the infinite for a schedule and a utensil. Or, it is the conductor stepping off the podium to tell the composer what note belongs next. The music exists. Our function is not to write it. Our function is to hear it and render it faithfully on the level of living. In other words, go to God for light, never for things. Go to Spirit for revelation, never for a diagram. Light carries within itself the pattern of what must appear, and very often it will surprise the personal sense. Another door, a different figure, a timing we could not have invented, a route that saves years of detour. Now, to some, this release feels like apathy, as if we are resigning ourselves to chance. Not so. This is not laziness, it is lawfulness. This is not passivity, it is the highest activity. Intelligent receptivity, followed by exact obedience. When the click is felt and light presents a step, you take that step promptly and competently. You answer that call. You make that apology. You cancel that plan. You send that letter. You sit still when silence is the step. But you do not adorn the light with your own ornaments. You do not add a schedule, an amount, a face. You consent to the government of spirit, and under that government, the forms that belong to harmony appear. Added, not coerced, because principle is self-enforcing. You see, outlining blocks the answer, because it narrows the channel to the width of our fear. It trades the vastness of guidance for the cramped corridor of personal will. And then we knock our elbows on both walls and call it delay. Let the outline go. Catch it in the act. I want this, in this way, by this hour. And lay it down like a toy that has outlived its use. Return to, Father, reveal thyself, and stay until the inner yes is felt. Then move only on that yes. This is the correction. This is the safety. And this is the secret by which demonstration appears without strain. We refuse to choose the form, and in that refusal, Spirit reveals it, lawfully, beautifully, in its time. Now then, Let us not leave this in the clouds. If spirit is what we say, there must be evidence at the level where we live, and not as prizes for performance, but as the lawful outworking of contact. I have no spiritual pride in telling you this. I know where I am, and I know just where I am not yet. But over and over, nearly a lifetime now, I have watched the same pattern reveal itself. First the hush, then the light, then the human step that carries the answer to the spot that seemed barren, and the form added in its time. Years ago, there was a winter that opened on bareness. The ledger was more blank than full, the obligations were real, and the temptation to petition was hot on the lips. Instead, I sat, "Father, reveal thyself." No bills to heaven, no figures in mind, just consent. In that quiet, a simple instruction came, not a banknote, an instruction. Stop sending statements, put the work on a different basis, trust spirit to govern its own unfolding. It was not an outline, it was light. I obeyed. That month did not end with a windfall and a trumpet blast, but doors opened, invitations came without designing, and provision formed itself around the work in ways I could not have demanded. You see the lawfulness? Light first, step next, form added. In health matters, the same order holds. I have stood before a room with a head so heavy it seemed I might not finish the hour, and I did not bargain for relief. I turned within until the click was felt, no words, only that inward yes. And at the 50th minute, the pressure simply was not there, and the last minutes were spoken in freedom. No magic, no boasting. Illumination dissolves the picture's authority, and the body registers the government of peace. In relationships, we want someone else to become our form of harmony. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Never, never, never take a name to God with a script for their lines. Go for light. In the silence, you may be shown a step that has nothing to do with your outline. Make an apology without self-justification. Release that bond entirely. Stop pressing and bless their freedom. Or simply be still and let the fever of your need pass. And when the heat cools, an ease appears. Sometimes with that person mended, sometimes with a new companionship you could not have scheduled. But always the same order. Hush, light, step, form added. Now many have said to me, I prayed and God didn't answer. And I must ask gently, what did you call for? If you called for an object, you called the wrong number. Call for God. Seek the kingdom. When contact is made, you will not need to strain your ears for a voice. The next human step will be so plain that to refuse it would feel unnatural. Write the letter. Cancel the plan. Say nothing. Say something. Do the work that appears. Results are the byproduct of illumination. When light comes, the way opens, and when you walk that way, the needed forms are added, lawfully, quietly, in their season. This is not personality. It is principle. It will repeat itself for you as surely as day follows night, when you stop begging for the dawn and simply turn toward the east. Now then, let us make this very practical, because without practice, the finest light remains theory. For 15 minutes, we will move through the stages we have been speaking about, and we will do it without judgment. We must never use the words right and wrong about our inner state. There are states and stages of consciousness, so we begin where we honestly are. If fear is loud, say so without drama. Acknowledge, Father, at this moment the human picture shouts, and I feel its pull. That is not a confession of failure, it is a starting point. Breathe and permit yourself to be exactly where you are while you set the intent to turn from picture to presence. Next, a brief truth to lift thought. Brief, not as a lever, but as a railing while you find your footing. God is spirit. God is present. The kingdom is within. One or two sentences, spoken softly, only to steady and simplify. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. The moment you stretch these words to reach a result, you have slid back into bargaining. Never, never, never use truth to make God perform. Use truth to remember the climate in which prayer lives. Now release the object. Consciously lay down the shopping list. Stop describing the problem to God. God needs no information. Turn within from information to receptivity. You may say once, I seek thee, not things, or thank thee that thou art, and notice how the mind loosens its grip on the picture. Gratitude without an object begins to dissolve the personal will. Keep it pure. No hooks, no for. Just, thou art. Enter stillness. Let the only remaining syllable be the key that opens the door. Father, reveal thyself. Say it once or twice, then be still. Not a nap, not a drift. Holy attentiveness. If the mind wanders, do not scold it. Return with the key. Reveal thyself. And again, release the words. Sit as one consenting to be shown, not as one trying to show God a plan. Watch for the click without forcing it. Do not demand sensation. Sometimes it is a feather touch of ease, sometimes a widening quiet, sometimes only the end of strain. Accept peace or clarity as contact, not excitement, but assurance. When it comes, rest a few breaths longer to let it seal, then carry it into the day. Do not outline the final picture. Move on the light that appears. One phone call, one apology, one change of direction, one quiet waiting. If no step is given, keep the peace and attend to the duties at hand. Guidance meets you on the road of obedience. Remake contact in brief pauses, 20 seconds of reveal thyself before a meeting, a minute of objectless gratitude between tasks. In this way, words are used only to arrive at silence, and contact provides the guidance human planning cannot. Do this morning and evening, and as often as needed, and you will see the same order repeat itself. Hush, light, step, and the forms that belong to that light added, lawfully, quietly, in their time.